Ready?
1 second.
It's a recording.
It's recording.
Well, it's goodbye to Roger and Serena, and it's hello from David and Jim, presenting another episode of Unforced Error, the show where two old guys say the things that the Eurosport, Amazon Prime, BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5 commentators don't dare say about tennis. And we've got a lot to talk about tonight, David, haven't we?
Yes. Wow. The world has changed.
It has. Very
dramatically.
Well, definitely. The very, very sad news a few weeks ago. End of an era after so many years. Lots of mourning, people crying, bank holidays. You know, the news just absolutely dominated by it. Roger Federer retiring, of course.
Exactly. Especially in the UK.
It is. I mean, I don't know if there was any other news around, actually. It just dominated.
No idea. All I know is Federer.
Everything.
And I have a question for you immediately, which is, how do you feel about this?
Well, we knew it was coming, didn't we? We knew it wouldn't last forever, his career. It lasted a lot longer than any of us thought. I can remember when he was in his pomp, when he'd won about 3 or 4 Wimbledons in a row, when he must have been about 23, 24. At a press conference, he said, you know, there's no reason why I can't carry on playing until I'm 40, and that's what I intend to do, and that's what I hope to do. And I just laughed because, great player though he was, I couldn't imagine that happening at all. And yet it did happen.
It did. This is almost like an anticipated moment that we've been talking about for almost a decade. I remember when Djokovic started dominating in 2011, Federer went through a whole year of playing his worst tennis. He was having fights with the interviewers, you know, and back then, all the channels, commentators, tennis shows, they were all talking, is it over for Roger Federer? This was more than a decade ago. And what has he done since then?
Well, I think there's a famous saying, I think, in every American's life, there's only 2 or 3 acts, like a stage play.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a second act in each great American life. And with Roger Federer, there's been really about 3 or 4, haven't there? There's the ball boy becoming a moody young tennis player with a bad temper in the very early days. Then the serve and volleyer coming from a low-seeded position to beat Sampras, serving and volley on almost every point.
Yes.
Then the unopposed person, no great rival out there. Nalbandian maybe was his greatest rival, who won their first 5 meetings. And then Nadal, this is Act 4, I suppose.
Yeah.
Nadal, and then Nadal taking over on grass, that's another thing. And right up until, I suppose, his great Indian summer, where he won the Australian Open twice in a row, almost won back Wimbledon. And you could almost divide it into his sportswear too, when he finished with Nike and went with Uniqlo in 2018. He actually changed shoes. I didn't realise this until tonight. He was always with Nike, but he went to his own brand. He has a stake in a company called Ons, I think. Or On.
I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, so he wasn't wearing Nike at the end. He was wearing a different brand.
Interesting, because when he moved to Uniqlo, he was still using Nike shoes.
Yes.
But so he ended up in something else.
Yeah, ended up in different clothing. I don't think he ever won another Grand Slam when he switched to the Japanese.
He was getting old.
firm. But look, in a way, half of me feels relieved because I was so dreading him retiring. It's quite good. Now it's happened. I don't have to dread it anymore. It's here. It's happened.
It's happened. And when we watched Laver Cup, you could feel the pressure. When is it ending? Then he cried. Everybody cried. That was like fairy tale ending ceremony. And then the next day, watching him sitting on the bench for the Europe team, and he was so relaxed. Can you imagine that that you're going to have a ceremony and you're that popular? How can you control yourself from crying when you have billions of people watching, looking? Nobody likes to be seen crying, do you?
Not in public. I think it's a lot more acceptable since, Princess Diana's day, when it suddenly became a very sentimental country in a very sentimental world, but it's come full circle. There's a symmetry. When he first won Wimbledon title, he cried.
He did.
You know, not many champions before him did cry. Even Goran didn't cry, but he was just so overcome. This means so much to me. It wasn't totally unexpected because he'd had a very good run 2 years previously. He was a very high seed, but he was just, you know, and many other Grand Slams. When he lost at the Australian Open final, I think 2009 to Nadal, he was crying too, and Nadal comforted him then.
I remember.
Just as Nadal comforted him at the end. But prior to the Laver Cup and the press conferences before the tournament got underway, he didn't look happy. He looked very tense, very nervous. He'd announced his retirement already. Apparently, I think he knew about a week after Wimbledon, he had a scan result and it wasn't a good result. So a week after he went, he came back to Wimbledon, didn't he, for the ceremony? Really,
he did. I watched the ceremony with all the champions coming in. Yeah.
So he's known for quite a while.
Yeah, you put it well there about Federer's crying, because that describes Federer. If we can remember one thing in many things to remember about Federer, his love for all that is tennis was so genuine, and that's pure.
Yes, I mean, all the reports have said he loved every aspect of tennis. He loved the travelling, you know, which a lot of people don't like. Pete Sampras didn't like the travelling, getting on an aeroplane, even if it's your own private aeroplane, unlike the days of Borg, where they caught a plane with people going, you know, on holiday to the Costa Brava and stuff. He loved the travelling. He loved the training blocks, the hard work, throwing a medicine ball around on a windy backstreet tournament. He loved the rackets being restrung behind the scenes. And I've read that little anecdotes, really, which is typical of him, apparently, was, you know, he talked to the racket restringer and as he was restringing his racket. And then he'd say, "Do you want a coffee? I'm just going to get a coffee now. Would you like me to bring one back for you?" Yes. And I wonder how many other tennis players would even have visited the restringer. They wouldn't have sent a flunky or their PA person to get their rackets restrung. But he knew exactly the tension of all his strings, the cross strings too.
Everything about tennis. That's one of the reasons why he was so loved. It's almost what my father once told me. You can climb the biggest mountain of life and become rich and popular, but you always still connect with all people on earth. From the poor to the rich.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we'll have to stop this loving just a little bit, just to emphasize, like all of us, he had his flaws. Unlike all of us, you know, he just elevated tennis to an art form. You know, he's the father of the sabre. The drop shot, which at the last moment, he would push to the baseline, making the shot look as if it was going to be a drop shot, and then suddenly just hold it on his strings and hit it past the surprise player running in for the drop shot. Yeah, he lived in a bubble to a certain extent. I think he came from quite a wealthy family, it's fair to say, like a lot of great tennis players. You know, I think sometimes he was discussing with members of his staff, they're saying, "Oh, I need a new watch. I've broken my watch." And he would say, "Well, why don't you get a Rolex? I get Rolexes and they're really good watches."
Yes.
And they just laughed because a Rolex is, you know, is the preserve of someone with a lot of money. You just didn't know that normal people don't buy Rolexes.
I didn't know
that.
But
hey, we all have our problems. Sometimes in defeat, he would come up with a reason for the defeat rather than saying, "Look, the best person won. It would be, well, you know, because of my back injury." There was a bit of that. He wasn't popular with everyone, I must say. You know, you mentioned Stephen earlier.
Stephen, yes.
He's not the only person who feels he was arrogant, but my God, if he was arrogant, he backed it up 99 times out of 100.
Yes, and you know, I think that was his worst enemy, actually, in tennis. I think that's why he didn't leave tennis with the most Grand Slams, wanting it so much.
That's the danger.
So much.
That's the danger.
And that was the problem. Whereas Djokovic was always able to disconnect from that. Djokovic, in those moments of pressure, he just surrenders and lets go. And that's why he wins those points. Whereas with Federer, he held on so much to that feeling that he fucked it up.
He cared too much, and there's a very thin line, isn't it, between caring too much and not really caring at all. Sometimes you got the impression Serena Williams wasn't that fond of tennis and would just pick and choose her tournaments.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I can see with Federer, sometimes with the opponents of Federer, he had an aura almost like he was God's chosen tennis person sometimes. But the way he played, it was easy to think that
To think
yourself.
that,
And my God,
yes.
if you woke up yourself and looked in the mirror and said, "Oh yeah, I'm Roger Federer," you would think that too. So
Jeez.
what will you miss? What made Federer so great? What will you miss most about him?
The way his body flows in the tennis court. Federer in full flow. What about you?
I think there's many things. I would say maybe point number one, how quick he was between points. So there was no
Wonderful.
shilly-shallying. A couple of bounces, that determined look he would give before bending into the service action. Just how different he was in terms of when he threw the ball up to serve, he'd be looking at the opponent rather than the ball. I mean, keep your eye on the ball is a lesson we're all taught, especially when you're serving. But he would only look at the ball at the last moment. He knew where it was. He was looking at his opponent. Which way are
see where
you
he was
moving?
going.
I can adjust this at the last moment with disguise. Put the ball where I want. He hasn't been imitated. You go down to the local tennis courts and players do not play like Federer because they can't. It was the same with Borg. People did not play like Borg. People did not even use Borg's racket. And very few people used Federer's racket when he had that white racket.
Yeah, I remember.
Iconic one, because it was
Smaller.
just so different.
He was very different.
You try playing with it, it was just unusable because
nightmare.
only he could
nightmare.
use it. So those are one of the many things I'll miss about him. The fact he didn't retire during matches. I think once in the Grand Slam he withdrew in the French Open in the fourth round. But there'd be very few injury timeouts. And, very few walking up to the net. I'm not feeling it. I'm withdrawing. He played a massive amount of consecutive things. So
Yes.
he was one of those office workers who, if he's feeling a bit under the weather, would still come into the office.
That's exactly it. That's him. And especially if he was in the zone. He was one of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen in a tennis court.
He looked stylish. He seemed to have the best tennis clothes, but it was probably because he had such a good body. He'd look good in any tennis clothes.
Yes, exactly. Perfect body for tennis, just like Djokovic's as well. We've been talking about this almost every episode we've had. Who is the best of all time? I know we have to wait for Djokovic and Nadal to retire, but is Federer out of the equation now? Because less Grand Slams than Djokovic and Nadal, down head-to-head versus those two. Who had more weeks as number one? Djokovic passed him as well, and never really beat Nadal on clay, and he was beaten in his throne by Nadal on grass. So doesn't that tell the story of who is not the best of all time? We can look at the beauty, the way he played, longevity. So yes, he had really nice records, but they were all beaten by two other guys. Now tell me, is he still in the race to be considered the best ever? Or is it just an emotion that we feel because of the love we have for him?
Well, I'm going to split myself into three parts for this answer. I'm going to split my body and my soul into three parts so I can hedge my bets.
Yes.
My head definitely says Nadal and Djokovic are better because you can only measure really the Grand Slams. To me, they're the holy grail. I don't care about the Montreal Open. The fact that Federer won the second most number of tournaments is still a great achievement. Jimmy Connor's still number one. But the head-to-heads, and in the Grand Slams too, it has to be Nadal and Djokovic.
And more weeks as number one.
Definitely, but to split myself into the second part, but my heart says there's more to tennis than statistics. How much can you reduce a man into a number? Sure. And it's, if I was passing a public court and didn't know anything about tennis, I would stop and watch Roger Federer play, and I say that. Is that ballet or is that tennis?
Yeah.
The way he played the game, the spirit he played the game, very quick in between points. Then my third thing, I'm now in the bar late at night and I'm a Federer fan. I've got an RF cap on my head and I'm draped in a Swiss flag. And I'm arguing with someone who says, yeah, look at Nadal's head-to-head and look how many he won and stuff. And I would say that a lot of the season is on clay courts. And Federer was so good on clay that he would reach the end of the tournament and face Nadal, and that's the worst place to face Nadal. Horrible. Whereas on grass, where Federer was much more dominant, Nadal plays less grass court.
I mean, there's one or two tournaments before Wimbledon.
So Federer's record against Nadal on grass, 3-1, and he won the last battle there. Not 3-1. No, sorry, it's more than that, isn't it?
Yes.
But yeah, he was dominant on that over, say, Nadal anyway, not Djokovic.
That would be your...
But that head-to-head is skewed by the fact that Federer challenged Nadal more often on clay and they met less often on grass. So, of course, the head-to-head is going to favour Nadal quite a bit from that extent. With Djokovic, I've got less excuses as a barroom bore for the head-to-head. He bested
everywhere.
Bested Federer everywhere, but then he bested and beasted everyone else.
Yeah.
So those are the three sides of the arguments, really.
Very good sides. I connect with all of them. I even has a great fan of Federer. I think the best of all time has to be the person that beat more times the other one.
So it's head-to-head rather than a number of Grand Slams.
More than anything, just because we're talking about face-to-face, 1 versus 1.
Yeah, it's great to have the bragging rights. It's really important. I've beaten you more times than I've lost to you, a certain person. But it's styles which make matchups. I could perhaps beat a player quite regularly, but... you know, that player can beat someone, might be you, who beats me and beats me easily most of the time.
Well said.
Because their style matches you. They're not afraid of you. They've got your number.
They do.
Yeah, it's a strange thing.
It is. I agree.
You know, and yeah.
It's definitely difficult to put like a final definition on it.
Yeah, we all have our bogey players. But the head-to-head, I agree, is very important.
It's true. Let me put it this way then. I am sad in a way that Federer is not the one with all the records.
But hey, you know, for those people, and I'm probably one of them, Federer is still on grass, still just ahead of Djokovic, I think, in terms of he won 8 Wimbledons. Djokovic is catching up.
Yeah.
The story's not over yet. And it'd be very interesting to see in 40 years' time. Hopefully we'll both still be alive then, playing crown bowls or whatever we're doing. Whether, you know, people, young kids... if you say to Roger Federer, if they'll know who they are, or whether they'll know Djokovic and Nadal or Alcaraz better, will they know? Because there have been other kind of precedents for this. Before there were the 4 Musketeers, there were 4 very big French players, I think, back in the 1920s, who were great. And I suppose the only one you might have heard of now is a player called René Lacoste. And you've heard of René Lacoste because he makes Lacoste sportswear.
So is that the guy that made the Lacoste
He was a
brand?
very famous tennis player. I couldn't tell you whether he was better than the 3 other Musketeers.
Yes.
But he's the one we remember now because he started the sports company. Same as Stan Smith, Stan Smith's shoes.
Yeah. Oh,
you know, a lot of kids will probably know him better than Elin Nastase because he's got the sportswear. Which brings me on to my question for you. What do you think he will do? And what would you do if you were Roger Federer now? Would you get a job as an accountant or a plumber or... what would your next move? Where can you go? You've been at the top of the mountain with an eagle on each shoulder, looking down on everyone.
Yes.
Now what?
All the money in the world. You do what the hell you want. I mean, the sky's the limit now. Of course, he already traveled the whole world, so probably he doesn't want to travel for a while. I would just sit in my mansion with my family and enjoy a couple of years of just disconnection. Just going on holidays to different places.
Would you still play tennis?
I would play tennis in my own time, of course. Tennis is a wonderful thing. He's going to be playing with his friends in his backyard. But yes, I would definitely relax for a while. If I'm not Federer, even though I've traveled quite a bit, I would buy a caravan and go with my family, travel around the world. I would just go to the most stunning places in nature. And he can do that. Can you imagine if you have now billions or millions and you got nothing else to do other than take care of your family? Although there was an interesting question made to him. I don't know if you saw it. One of the reporters in the press conference asked him, if ATP in a few years' time invites you to join and starts to become part of one of the people that take care of tennis decisions, would you be interested? And Federer immediately said, no way. I wouldn't be interested in getting into politics now. And I liked that answer. What about you? What's your answer?
That's very interesting because I would say that would be on one of my list of things that I would be trying to force Roger Federer to do if I was in the tennis world, even if I wasn't a top ATP man, the risk of losing my own job. I think it would be good if he would have an influence over it. I think he's probably got some... A lot of the time he stayed out of the politics, and this was one of the reasons people criticised him when Djokovic was quite active and saying, look, this isn't fair, this isn't fair. Federer was just, I'm just staying out of this. And Nadal and Djokovic seem to be more especially Djokovic.
More
Yes,
than anybody.
he would, kind of consider strike action. We're not getting enough lower paid
Yes,
players aren't getting enough, and Federer's
yeah.
kind of floating above it. But I would think, one of the reasons I admire him is so quick between points. What are his thoughts? How you could speed up tennis? How you could stop Kilic bouncing the ball 20 times?
Jesus Christ.
Djokovic and Nadal, because it doesn't seem to have speeded up much. I don't think that the speed clock is working too much.
No, it's not.
What are his thoughts on Hawkeye making the game less human, taking that human element out of it? What are his thoughts on, people withdrawing at the last minute from tournaments because of injuries? Because he's got moral high ground there because he didn't. I think he should be on the committee of every Grand Slam.
I know it. I think it would improve tennis for sure. Maybe he deserves to be in our guest seat.
Just as a consultant, really, rather than the kind of, I would say at Wimbledon, he's said several times he thinks the clothing rule about all whites is too much, and he liked it back in the days of Edberg and Lendl where there were splashes of colour there.
Yes.
Little things. Why shouldn't he be on the committee, whereas Tim Henman is?
Oh my God.
I would rather see someone who's really played more matches.
You said something
more
very
top
important.
matches. I think he should be.
You can see through the years that we followed Federer's career and personality, he would be the right person to be on those places.
Someone like John McEnroe, who's the self-appointed, what is he? Commissioner. I don't think that's a bad thing. Someone like McEnroe should be given a crack at the rules. It might be that Federer really wants to protect the old rules and doesn't want to change it. And even if I disagreed with him, I think he should have that shot at power. He deserves a shot.
Yeah, I agree. But I completely understand that after giving so much to tennis, and he didn't give to tennis only as a tennis player, isn't it? He did give as ambassador. Yes, I think what we're going to see, and he already admitted to it, is probably commentating as a guest here and there in some matches. And he's going to be a team captain in the Laver Cup, I bet. Yes,
Bjorn Borg's job is under threat. I read in the paper.
One more year.
I read in the paper, and this is an awful thing. I think it was the Daily Mail. A journalist called Mike Dixon said that Bjorn Borg's contribution as Laver Cup captain was almost like he was a deck chair attendant, keeping the chairs. And it's a shame because Borg is a hero of mine, but maybe he wasn't suited to that job. But apparently Djokovic was far more involved in giving advice.
Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer.
Yeah,
in 5 Laver Cups, he practically didn't speak a word.
Yeah.
He is one of the most boring personalities I've ever seen. This is not to say that he might be one of the most wonderful personalities, because somehow, sometimes it feels like truth doesn't make a noise. And we all blab our ideas and our personalities with our voices. And maybe there's beauty there in someone that does not speak so and is quite shy and introvert like he is. Or at least how I understood he is. Maybe you know him better and you can explain that to me. But my God, he is boring. Jesus, man. Watching him in the Europe's team was just... But I've grown to him, by the way. I enjoyed his softness. But, he was never going to have a chance. How could he be if there's Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal? At least one of them was always in Laver Cup advising the players.
Strong personalities. Could you have had McEnroe managing Federer, Djokovic?
It doesn't work.
Nadal, maybe they need someone like that. Maybe they don't.
It's true. Even McEnroe didn't speak as a coach there as much as he speaks on a tennis show when he talks. He was more... like quiet, and every once in a while he would say something.
Borg and others are probably a lesson to Federer about their retirement. Borg struggled in retirement. I know he retired a lot earlier than Federer. His tennis went off the ball. I think McEnroe said on the seniors tour, they had to kind of like help him look good in matches and give him points and stuff. And he hasn't maintained the amazing ability he had as a tennis player. Jimmy Connors, I think, liked a few drinks and carried on playing till Federer's age, I think 40, 41. I think he had hip problems. Becker has obviously had hip problems. So hopefully Federer will be okay in terms of, he had quite a few injury comebacks late in his career. It's going to take a toll on his body, 1,500 matches.
Yes.
Connors had an unsuccessful time as a coach. He just couldn't last with people. Sharapova, I think he lasted about 2 weeks.
Wow.
He's a strong personality. These players are so good. Can they actually teach players?
True.
Do they understand how normal mortals feel and struggle with the game of tennis? Commentating's great, but it just won't be the same as walking out on centre court on finals day, walking down that tunnel. It'll be a big cliff edge for anyone, even Roger Federer. I would like to see him carry on and play seniors tennis and really rejuvenate seniors tennis. I would like to see seniors tennis given the place at Grand Slams. I would like to see a concurrent tournaments, the seniors playing the Wimbledon, singles, because it's always seniors doubles at Wimbledon. I don't want to see that. But why not take it seriously and have Federer and the best at other people play a shortened version of the game? Because it's really gone off the ball, seniors tennis. It was very exciting when it first came out with Connors, McEnroe and Borg. And maybe he could breathe new life into it.
He can, but he cannot move like he used to move.
How did he play in the Laver Cup doubles match?
Yeah, he was all right, but he wasn't moving the same
really
as always.
Yeah,
He's
that's
really
serious.
compromised.
Did he retire at the right time? Do you think he should have bowed out 5 years ago?
No, definitely not.
He would have missed out on those
great
two
wins.
Australian.
Yeah. No, I understand, and I'm glad he tried to stay for as long as he could.
Should he have bowed out after losing against Djokovic in that epic Wimbledon final?
No, that's the worst way to live. I think it's better to live with a loss next to Nadal in doubles than that terrifying. That loss would have been the last memory we remember for Federer. That would be disappointing.
But his last memory really was losing 6-love to Hurkacz in the final.
Yeah, in a way.
He played some good tennis that tournament.
Yeah, and that was the most symbolic moment of his demise. When he lost against Hurkacz 6-love in the last set of Wimbledon, that day I felt he was over. And of course, there was always that seed of hope that he would come. We were talking about it, weren't we? He's coming back to win another Grand Slam and then retire. We still wanted him.
Well, that was the plan for us.
Yeah, I know.
More so than for him.
Yeah, we wanted him to surpass Nadal with 22 Grand Slams. Oh, and then suddenly, poof, all gone. Serena. We didn't even say her name all this time. So, Serena definitely deserves our attention too, because she's one of the best of all time. It's very interesting how those two, Federer and Serena, retired in the same year. I didn't see that coming. Serena, because she just can't do it anymore. She doesn't run fast anymore. She doesn't have the same ability. And Federer is the same thing. He does not have the ability because the body doesn't let him. Serena definitely deserves a word because she's a great champion. I don't like her personality very much. I liked her when she was a kid. She was pretty spectacular, and the answers she would give. Do you remember that answer that she gave to the reporter where they asked Venus what she wanted to be remembered, and then they asked the same question to Serena, and Serena says, I would like one day others to play like me, which a little girl of 7-8 years say something like that is a pretty powerful, confident...
She was 7 or 8 when she said that.
Yes. It's on camera, you can see it on YouTube. It's powerful to hear a child say that. Means they really believe in themselves since that moment, or they're so self-centered that they don't see anybody else. But there's something there that kind of defined her career, and I still think to this day that Serena is living as the best of all time, because
Margaret Court 24 Grand Slams.
Yes, she won 24 Grand Slams in a different era.
Don't look her up on Wikipedia. She's probably been taken off.
Yes, exactly. So I don't know if Margaret Court won with the same power as Serena. And Serena almost got to 24 4 or 5 times. She lost. So she was fighting for it. But then her demise was, again, emotion. She just couldn't deal with it. But Serena's goodbye was incomplete. Did you feel that? Did you watch that last match? Did you watch the ending?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I took a keen interest, as I always do.
Yes, as a tennis lover and
nearly
admirer.
Always cheering on her opponents, I'm afraid.
Yes.
I must be honest. because I just didn't warm to her as a player and some of
Never.
the things she did. But great serve, which would have, given a lot of men. It would have been a great serve to take onto the men's tour.
And the
It was so
forehand and the
powerful.
backhand as well. Just
Yeah, crunching the
colossal.
forehand and the backhand. But I'll cause controversy, but I do say there was a lack of variety in her game. It was just so good. She didn't need that much
She
variety.
didn't need it.
Drop
That's
shots,
true.
she didn't really need those.
No, she didn't.
Volley at the net. Yeah, she was good because she played quite a lot of very successful doubles, didn't
Yeah,
she?
yeah.
At the big tournaments. Anyway, I think she was one-dimensional, but what a dimension. That dimension was good
Well
enough
said.
to blow
That's it.
legends of the past and future legends.
All Serena
the
needed
court.
to do was blow everyone out of the
Yeah.
court with her power.
She'd often be struggling and be down a set and fighting herself. And then instead of going to plan B, she would just hit the ball harder and start to do everything a bit better. But she wouldn't suddenly change and
She wouldn't.
go to the backhands or
Not so much.
suddenly
No.
start hitting
That's
it.
true.
She would just start hitting the ball harder.
Yeah.
There
And
was,
it worked most of the time. It's funny how
was she that fast? Because you mentioned
She was fast. She was definitely fast, especially when she was younger.
It's hard to remember because, she has changed so much in terms physically.
True. She
The
got
young Serena looks
she
so
got
different.
bigger and bigger, stronger and stronger, heavier and heavier.
Hair
And you can
changed.
hair changed so many times. Serena, she's almost like a man in women's tennis. Nobody could stand her power. She would just bully everyone.
I mean, like Federer in a completely different way, there was no one who looked like her in terms of... I've noticed a few players, they put on a bit of muscle. I think even Swiatek looks a bit more muscular. Yeah, no one looks as muscular.
No.
She looks like a weightlifter
She really
many ways.
does.
I don't know if she
yes.
did weight training or not.
Maybe. But let me tell you that this last Grand Slam that she played, it was impressive. I liked to watch her play, and I liked that she gave some good matches. All the matches were hard, and she was fighting for it, so congratulations. Now, let me just say this. This is not the end for Serena. She hasn't retired yet. She'll come back.
I did get the impression she gave an interview to Vogue with all kinds of modern kind of speak, like I'm evolving away from tennis.
Yes.
And I don't think she was
didn't say
totally
goodbye.
committed to retiring.
No,
But I think everyone
definitely not.
interpreted it at that. It'd be very embarrassing for her if she does come back because
She will come back.
she's been given the presents. She was awarded a cake at the warm-up
She
tournament.
was.
I think this is quite a typical story about Serena. She didn't hang around to receive it on court. She just stomped off court. She lost in
know.
the first round. And this is a side of Serena Williams. This tournament wanted to mark it. I think it was Cincinnati. There's a presentation waiting for her, but no.
And even the end, at the Grand Slam where she lost, it was kind of like a goodbye that it just felt incomplete in a way. And I think she will come back for another one, maybe a US Open or a Wimbledon.
Well, we've
just to
been
give
here
it a
before.
try.
Andy Murray retired, and there was a big tribute on the Australian Open video screens.
And
And
then
how's he
was-
doing in his
I know,
retirement now?
I know. That's true.
He's back or he isn't back,
Yeah,
depending on which
it's-
way you look at it.
Yeah, it's true. But Serena is 41, huh? 41.
Yeah, retired at
tough.
the same time, same age as Roger Federer, but so different
True.
in so many ways.
So many ways.
She would pick and choose her tournaments, wouldn't she? She could almost write a book on how not to be a 23-time Grand Slam winner because she didn't play many tournaments. A lot of the time she would just disappear and then enter the slams. Sometimes it worked out and she would win from nowhere unseeded, and sometimes it wouldn't work out and everyone would go, she's not playing enough tournaments.
Yeah, exactly.
And Venus hasn't retired yet. She's
No,
still...
she hasn't, unbelievable. And she's older than her sister.
She's getting wild cards into
Yeah,
tournaments.
just little.
She's more low-key, isn't she? And
Yes.
I wonder how she felt, just being overshadowed by her sister. And,
Yeah, can you believe that?
she would watch her sister's big finals looking a bit bored in the stands. But
She did, yeah.
on the few times Venus went far and Serena got knocked out early, Serena Williams didn't seem to be watching from the stands.
Yeah.
It just seemed to be, I'll support you, but she wouldn't get the support back. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, sometimes it definitely felt that it was like that. Yeah, so let's see if Serena comes back or not. There's definitely an emotion for Serena that does not exist, that exists in Federer. Because Federer is just so lovable compared to Serena. It's
but many people love her. But I do think, the job of this UFE is to say the things that commentators don't say. Yeah. And I do think bad side was not mentioned in the tributes. The behaviour, losing against Osaka in the US Open final, which overshadowed Osaka's big moment.
Definitely.
The claims of sexism and racism in some matches. She had a side which was very hard to like. She really
very difficult.
She was the greatest. The US Open played up to this by giving a video tribute before her matches from Queen Latifah, calling her the greatest, and they reversed it, the order that they went on court.
Yeah.
It's what's the drill with the US Open? The person who goes on court first is the lower ranked player, isn't it? And then the higher ranked player comes on second. But no, it was reversed.
That's weird.
Yeah, so we're going to have a whole episode. I'm sure we've covered Serena's bad behaviour in the past.
And we will go back there.
Yeah.
In time.
Yeah. Of course, to get to the top, you do need sharp elbows. How much can you be a saint and be number one player in the year as she was so often, so many different times?
Yeah.
I can't even talk about her rivalries in her head-to-head because they really weren't.
Very rare.
There was no defining rivalry.
Yeah, I think the
even
best,
her sister.
It was the sister. And then she flew away from her.
A lot of those matches, were not great. Were not great matches.
I watched a few, but I haven't watched them all. There's an impact of Federer leaving that I don't feel in Serena, even though I absolutely always loved Serena playing tennis, even if one dimension. And like you said, it was an extraordinary dimension.
US Open, I think it was a bit of a circus until Serena Williams got knocked out. I think she was dominating.
The news,
her opponents weren't getting the credit. It was all, all the celebrities were out in force, buying up all the expensive tickets, and they all wanted her to win, and the opponents' shots weren't being clapped.
Definitely.
And I think we could enjoy the tennis in a more pure sense after she was knocked out. It wasn't all about Serena. It was about the tennis after she got knocked out.
And here we go. Let's have a few minutes on the US Open. I know that you're not excited as much as I am about the results. Some of these players in the men's, like Alcaraz, still has to beat Djokovic or Nadal in a Grand Slam final or semi-final. So that's missing a little bit from the tennis. But I am very excited about the result of this Grand Slam because, first of all, we have a new Grand Slam winner, Alcaraz. And he has all the skills, even though he's not a personality that I would much rather have a rude. He looks like a wonderful man.
He's a lovely man.
Lovely. And he's the closest to Federer's demeanor, funny enough. He's very calm, very relaxed, very respectful. Really like that guy. So I would rather have him be the new force. But we have to admit when we see Alcaraz has all the magic and all the shots, all the tennis. He's the fastest player on court. He's a force to be reckoned with. And I'm glad to see him win. If not Kyrgios, at least it was Alcaraz. And let's also give props to Swiatek, who solidified a bit more a story in the WTA tennis, because we haven't had for a long time. We had lots of little fairy tales, Raducanu, Kerber, Osaka, Sloane Stephens, and some various names that have been winning Grand Slams for the last 3 years that I don't even remember anymore.
Keys.
Yes.
Good player.
Swiatek is showing that she's one of the masters. Do you agree? And tell me about what your feelings about the results of the US Open men and women.
Swiatek, to get back to that.
Yeah. And one outside clay.
Outside clay,
pretty good.
It's a big thing because I was starting to think is she a clay court specialist?
I always believed, Jim. I always believed.
At least is kind of springtime her time of year where she'll win on hard courts. and win on clay court,
Yeah.
but she doesn't play well beyond July. She's proved that wrong, and I think she surprised herself.
Yes,
Before the
she did.
tournament, I don't like these balls. They're different from the men's balls. She wasn't the only person to complain.
No,
It does
and
seem
she
very
adapted
strange.
to it.
And I think after she won, she said, I was surprised. I wasn't, I'm not entirely comfortable on the hard courts.
And she didn't play well throughout the whole tournament. She survived various of the matches.
Of the last 7 matches of the women's tournament, from the quarterfinals on, I think there was only one match which went to 3 sets.
Crazy. And here, adding to what you were talking about.
Oh, stats alert.
Yeah, here we go. Let me show you something. Look at this. Swiatek's last 10 finals wins are all in 2 sets.
Yeah.
And apart from the last one, nobody ever took more than 4 games.
But this brings me back to, needing a rivalry. And Greg Ruzewski, actually, very opinionated on this. It was nice to see. It was saying she needs a rival. Ash Barty, please come out of retirement.
It'd be wonderful.
And, this would have been a great rivalry. Why did you come back?
True.
Because Ons Jabeur, God bless her, lovely lady.
No,
she was smiling before the final.
Yeah.
Maybe she's just a bit too jokey, but she was having a nightmare in the final. She turned it around a bit,
but it wasn't enough.
There were some really quite disappointing displays. Caroline Garcia against Ons Jabeur in the semi-final.
True.
There's no way of saying, they did say at the end, she's nothing to be ashamed of. But she had a nightmare and she knew it. Coco Gauff,
also,
sometimes her forehand still goes missing. I do find it hard to warm to Swiatek. I'll give you an example. Often she'll hold her hand up when the other person's about to serve.
Nadal does that. It's horrible.
I don't think that's on. It just looks unnecessary to me.
Do you do it yourself?
Very occasionally, players are really quick between points, like yourself, and I must admit. But I thought with her, the players weren't being particularly quick.
Nadal does that almost every point.
She swapped a racket on match point. I don't know what that was about. Was that my guess was, and it's just a complete guess. She said to a friend, "I will win the tournament with this racket. I've signed it for you," or something like that. I don't know. I can't see much warmth or
yes, but wait, Jim,
there,
here we're not talking about warmth. We're talking about tennis history. That rivalry is coming. Look at Federer. He was dominating tennis for 5 years. Nobody had a chance. And suddenly there was Nadal and suddenly there was Djokovic. I'm happy that finally someone is breaking these boring WTA fairy tales that die right after the win. I'm not trying to see that we have to warm to her. We just have to warm to the idea that these dead-end stories came to an end. And maybe, just maybe, for your own pleasure, the great rival that is coming to be the great rival of Swiatek will be someone you like very much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
so
hope
it's just in that sense. So of course I understand that you don't warm to her as you don't warm to Alcaraz as well. Tell us about it.
There's still time for Azarka maybe to come back. I'm not saying that I like her, but I really did think she'd be doing better. Doing better than she has.
Me too.
Coco Gauff, I do have doubts, but she's still very young, and so is Swiatek.
Very young.
Swiatek and Alcaraz are, I think, the only 2 US Open
20.
champions, both born this century.
Unbelievable. So, what do you think about these 2 wins, Swiatek and Alcaraz winning? Does it symbolize anything to you, or is still nothing too important for tennis?
I think Alcaraz, it's still a bit too early to say. He could be like a Chang who won the French Open. I don't think he will be. I think he's got other slams
Chang
in him.
Needed a bit more height.
But Chang, I think, won the French Open at 17 or 18. And never won a Grand Slam again. He reached 2 more finals. He was still up the top there. Alcaraz, still a question, how well can he do at Wimbledon? Still very early. He can still definitely prove that. But that was my big question about a lot of players. Azarka, Swiatek. There seems to be more of a specialisation on the individual surfaces these days. And grass seems to be the bogey surface for a lot of players.
It's true.
Medvedev as well. Nadal got knocked out by Tiafoe. Again, Nadal never loses. He just gets injured, really. And there was an injury.
There was an injury.
Seemed to be a factor. Alcaraz has won in absentia in terms of Djokovic was the one watching from his sofa eating a packet of Doritos.
Just not the same.
So let's see how he gets on against him. But you can only win against the players put in front of you. I do get the impression with the men's singles at this tournament, a lot of players were bottling and were nervous But if you have everyone in the draw bottling and nervous and not confident, there's still somebody going to win the tournament. Not every player can bugger it up. Someone has to win, even if
Someone has
they
to win.
bugs up. And Alcaraz stuck at it. Sinner, credit to him too. Match points up.
And adding to what you just said, it's true. You know, some of the Grand Slams in the last couple of years did feel a little bit like that. Oh, somebody had
Team
to
Zverev.
win. Yeah, that
you
one,
know,
for example.
not who's going to win, you know, who's not going to lose.
That's exactly it.
And so many people blew it. I looking through the draw. So Norrie had a big chance, didn't he? Who did he lose against? Kashanov, was it? Kyrgios. My God, that's a golden chance. You beat Medvedev.
How can you
You're playing so well. Who did he lose to? Was that Kashanov as well? No.
He was.
Did everyone lose to Kashanov? I'm probably getting...
Then Kashanov lost in the semis. Thank God for that.
Berrettini. Who did he lose to? These are all... Taylor Fritz lost in the first round. He's been going well recently. Went well in the Laver Cup, didn't he?
Crazy.
So it was just so many people. Rude went off the boil in the final. I think he had not thought of as a great hard court player until very recently.
2 Grand Slam finals in a row. It's very, very impressive. Maybe Rude, when he develops a master weapon to all his all-round complete game, he could become a multiple Grand Slam winner.
But I like him.
I like him
He's
very much.
He's a very neat player. He reminds me of Pat Rafter a bit. He's got quite a cute touch around the net. He does very good angles up in the net. Tiafoe can come out with credit too.
True, yes.
And from the Laver Cup.
From the Laver Cup too.
Played well. And Ferrero, Alcaraz's coach, said after the US Open, he's just got a hunch it's going to be Alcaraz and Sinner dominating for the next decade, which is quite a thing. I must admit, that doesn't fill me with kind of joy about the coming decade.
There's more coming.
They're not my favourite players.
No, I know. And there's more coming. Let's not forget that Kyrgios now is in the mix. He is finally focused. So let's hope for that. Let me just go back a little bit quickly and tell you, when you're talking about the value of the win of some of these Grand Slams without the greats, let's go back to Federer. His various first Grand Slam wins were against players that were not even close to his caliber. Then they came in Nadal and Djokovic. So let's see maybe if Alcaraz starts having some sort of dominance, if then some very interesting, powerful players come, the new masters of the world.
But when Federer came through, you know, we didn't think these players he was beating were rubbish until he beat them. Hewitt was established.
I know.
People were saying, John Lloyd said after he won Wimbledon, this guy can win it for another 10 years.
Not even close.
He was only, he's not that good a player after Federer dominated him for 2 years. Same with Roddick. You know, this player is he's amazing. He just got such hunger and he's so... And then a few years after Federer beats him every match, well, he's not really that good.
But breakfast, man.
You know, Federer wasn't beating him by Roddick hitting the ball in the net every point. Beating him in hard rallies and just tying him up in knots. And,
that's true. Federer was just a level above everybody else. Okay, so I'm hopeful with the results from this Grand Slam. I'm hopeful for the future.
I'm less hopeful. I'm grumpy. I'm grumpy for the future.
I know.
And I do think Alcaraz, great achievement though it was, no way is he world number one. The rankings are just completely wrong. I mean, Nadal is the reigning Australian Open champion and French Open champion. Alcaraz has won the US Open and went out fairly cheaply in the other tournaments. Nadal reached the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. He only went out because of injury. So how is Nadal not the world number one? They're not putting enough store by Grand Slam.
Yes, and
results.
That is definitely a UFE episode that we have to have about the rankings, because I do agree they're a bit strange. And also, that was strange how Federer stayed on top 10 for so long after spending almost 2 years without playing.
Yeah, protected rankings because of the pandemic, wasn't it? So yeah, that was fortuitous. That was lucky.
Still weird, yeah. But anyway, let's hope that my hope is stronger than your disbelief.
Yeah,
because we need this in tennis, yes?
I will miss the Federers. I miss the Soderlings, the Del Potros, the Safins who've disappeared. Recently, these new players, I was excited maybe Tsitsipas and Medvedev would be the ones to take over.
And it seems
that hasn't happened.
No.
We've had 15 years of Nadal dominating on and off, and now Alcaraz comes out of Spain. It would be nice to be very fussy to have someone from a different
Different
country.
nationality.
But he is a different player to Nadal.
Maybe
he stays
rude.
a lot closer to the baseline.
Yeah.
He hits drop shots a lot.
He's in the baseline every point. And have you seen some of the points he won in this Grand Slam? It's just madness.
He
It
runs in
seems
all
that-
directions.
But he's never
gets the
seen
ball
before.
back. Yeah.
Never seen
Yeah.
before. And then ending with an extraordinary winner from somewhere, nowhere.
Yeah.
So the kid has skills. Now, to kind of wrap it up for today, I would spend with you sitting here hours talking about Federer and remembering so many good things that he brought into court. We are going to miss Federer so badly. And it's funny because the ending of Federer as a tennis player also resembles in me something. Maybe because I'm his age, he resembles the aging of life and that we all will die one day, because it really touches.
It's always nice to end on a cheerful
On a
note.
cheerful note. It's kind of like, wow, man, this really symbolizes the end of something. It's definitely where the body starts to slow down, and you can feel like you see your hero, the guy that just a few days ago I watched on YouTube beat Blake in one of these finals, where he was one of the best finals he had. He was flying, Federer in full flow with full energy, and it does not exist anymore. We would have to rebuild him with a robot body to be able to do that again. So it symbolizes to me not only tennis, but life itself in a way. But we're not going to end on this sad note, because you're going to give us a beautiful, beautiful ending to our episode. Tell us, do you have a message for our Federer?
A message directly.
Yeah, something to tell our Federer if he ever listens to this.
Well, I mean, if
podcast.
this was being filmed, this would be the time now where I would turn directly to the camera, breaking the fourth wall, and say, well, just thank you for inspiring so many people. And I'm sure it was the case, really, that at times I've lost interest in tennis.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always said with Roger Federer, I'd rather see him win an easy 3-set match than watch many other top players involved in a 5-set match,
Yes.
which goes to 12-10 in the champions tiebreak.
Yes.
So, what greater compliment
Yeah,
can you
so
play?
true.
I'd rather see a boring Roger Federer match than an exciting match
I couldn't agree
against
with that.
Leighton Hewitt and Dan Evans in
No
a
problem.
thrilling semi-final. So, yeah, I remember
it's so
one
true.
particular Wimbledon match. My mum was very ill, and it was Roger Federer, and he's playing Juan Carlo Ferrero just on a beautiful summer's evening. And I was just watching it in the kitchen, and I always remember that. And I had a friend, Phil, who actually went to the match, and I said, wow, you saw that match? It's one of the best matches I've ever seen. They were just such great rallies and such great shots. God, that's brilliant. You watched it. He said, I thought it was really boring. So beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But
It's
to
so
me,
true.
it wasn't a match anyone would remember apart from me. I just remember watching and just thinking, this is just perfect. Such a lovely,
It's beautiful.
and it just stuck in my mind. I reckon he probably does remember.
He remembers everything.
A lot of matches.
He really does. Yeah, that's a good way to kind of put it.
Like a
because-
song soundtracks your life, and you can remember where you first heard that song.
Mhm, yes.
You were passing some builder's scaffolding, and you heard the song come on the radio, and you go, "Oh,
Yes.
that's really, I love that melody."
That's a great feeling, isn't
and
it?
that's
I
how
remember
that's how I
that
felt
feeling.
about certain Federer matches. I can
Yes.
remember where I was when the match took place.
Yes.
He soundtracked our lives.
Like magic. It's true. You can just watch Federer in full flow destroying his opponent and you are not bored. Yeah, so Federer will miss you and hopefully we'll see you from time to time. And final word, and this is the best, a quick word for Serena, Jim.
Goodbye. Well, I suppose the debut album was produced by David Redina, 1978. I met him in New York City in the meats.
78,
the
1
meat-
year before I was born. Perfect.
Yeah, the meat packing district of New York. I always remember he was wearing a shiny black plastic
Well-
raincoat, which attracted the attention of local policemen, and he was a most wanted man. Allegedly, Zorro was based on him.
Yes.
at the time he had an afro, which is probably the first afro in New York.